she has gone after setting a matchless example, and sadly we shall never see the like of her again.
Second Subaltern Elizabeth Windsor, whose life and that of the generation she came from was shaped by war and its fearsome burdens. Fergal Keane, BBC News.
And we are going now to Balmoral. We know that the members of the royal family who are still there are now, we think, going to a church service. A convoy of cars suggesting that they are going directly there, not pausing there at the flowers. Still a huge number of members of the public there paying their respects at Balmoral. And Kirsty Wark is there for us at Balmoral, and we're still seeing images from another camera, Kirsty, of the convoy. I wonder whether you're able to tell us who you might have been able to see.
There were 4 Range Rovers leaving through the gates of Balmoral past the crowds who've been here for many hours, and they contained Anne the Princess Royal, Commander Tim Lawrence, Princesses Beatrix and Eugenie, also Sarah Tyndall, Peter Phillips, the Earl and Countess of Wessex, and Louisa Wessex, Prince Andrew too. They're going to Crathy Castle, the Crathy Church, which they all know extremely well because they go there to worship when they're in residence during the summer or visiting. And it's where the Queen liked to be with all the locals who were part of the congregation. They're going there for a short service of prayer, and I think it'll be conducted by the chaplain to the Queen here, who is the Reverend Kenneth Mackenzie. So all the crowds here, very quiet. They've been coming since the early morning. They were here very late at night when I left, coming and dropping flowers by the light of their iPhone. And there have been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds lining, very quietly, respectfully, watching the royal party as it passes. Obviously, Princess Anne, Prince Edward and Prince Andrew have been at Balmoral since the Queen's death. The other royals have come more recently, and they're gathered. And this is the first time, because obviously yesterday was the first day that they were mourning the passing of the monarch. This is the first day when they have emerged from Balmoral to make this short service at Crathy Castle. And you know, it's extraordinary. There are people here of all ages. There are people from all nationalities. They're all leaving flowers. The flower area is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think they'll keep coming as well, because when I left Braemar this morning, there were buses, queues of people waiting for buses to bring them here. People wishing to pay their respects. I think wishing to be close to the Queen, knowing how much she loved Balmoral. And in fact, Princess Beatrice said it is the most beautiful place on earth. And the Queen has been coming here since she was a little girl. Queen Victoria first went to Crathy Kirk in 1848. So there's this tremendous feeling of continuity for the royal family at Balmoral.
This is BBC News with the latest headlines. Crowds gather at Buckingham Palace and the Mall after Charles III is formally proclaimed king. The king swore an oath and paid tribute to the late Queen at his accession ceremony at St James's Palace, televised for the very first time.
God save the king.
God save the king.
The king announces a bank holiday across the UK for the day of the Queen's funeral. Members of the royal family depart Balmoral for a church service in nearby Crathy Castle. Charles III has been proclaimed king in a ceremony at St James's Palace in front of hundreds of members of the Privy Council. In a traditional ceremony, but one which was televised for the first time. The new Lord President, the Conservative MP, Penny Mordaunt, confirmed the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II before the new monarch swore an oath. At his proclamation ceremony held earlier at St James's Palace, King Charles paid tribute to his late mother, saying her reign had been unequalled in dedication, duration and devotion. He vowed to follow her example and seek peace, harmony and the prosperity of all the nations where he is now head of state. He also confirmed that the day of the Queen's funeral will be a bank holiday across the country. Our royal correspondent, Nicholas Witchall, has been watching today's events.
In the setting of London's original royal palace at St James's, the Accession Council, a meeting of 200 privy councillors, Britain's political leaders, past and present, with other notable figures, a meeting rooted in past centuries, essential to the transition to a new reign and seen for the first time through television. The King joined the Accession Council gathered in the palace's throne room to make his declaration.
It is my most sorrowful duty to announce to you the death of my beloved mother, the Queen. I know how deeply you, the entire nation, and I think I may say the whole world, sympathize with me in the irreparable loss we've all suffered. My mother's reign was unequaled in its duration, its dedication, and its devotion. Even as we grieve, we give thanks for this most faithful life. I am deeply aware of this great inheritance and of the duties and heavy responsibilities of sovereignty, which have now passed to me. In taking up these responsibilities, I shall strive to follow the inspiring example I have been set in upholding constitutional government and to seek the peace, harmony and prosperity of the peoples of these islands and of the Commonwealth realms and territories throughout the world. And in carrying out the heavy task that has been laid upon me and to which I now dedicate what remains to me of my life, I pray for the guidance and help of Almighty God.
Concerning the security of the Church of Scotland.
The King took a centuries-old oath to preserve the position of the Church of Scotland.
I, Charles III, by the grace of God, of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and of my other realms and territories, King, Defender of the Faith, do faithfully promise and swear that I shall inviolably maintain and preserve the settlement of the true Protestant religion as established by the laws made in Scotland.
Watched by the heir to the throne, Prince William, Prince of Wales, and Camilla the Queen Consort, he signed the oath Charles R. Charles Rex, King. And then a moment of pageantry. From a balcony, the proclamation of the new King's reign.
Whereas it has pleased Almighty God to call to his mercy our late Sovereign Lady, Queen Elizabeth II, of blessed and glorious memory, by whose decease the crown of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is solely and rightfully come to the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George. We, therefore, do now hereby, with one voice and consent of tongue and heart, publish and proclaim that the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George is now, by the death of our late sovereign of happy memory, become our only lawful and rightful liege lord, Charles III.
The King's Guard gave 3 cheers.
3 cheers for His Majesty the King. Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray!
Following centuries-old tradition, the proclamation was also issued in the City of London. It will be repeated in Britain's other national capitals tomorrow.
Hooray! Hip hip!
affirming and proclaiming the reign of Charles III to all corners of his kingdom. Nicholas Witchall, BBC News.
Thanks to Nicholas. A remarkable morning in London. Let's turn to Rebecca Jones, who continues to watch events at Buckingham Palace.
Yes, good afternoon from Buckingham Palace, where the new king, King Charles III, is inside. He arrived back from that Accession Council at St James's Palace about 12:15 and has been inside since then. He was cheered by the considerable crowds here, huge crowds here, much larger than they've been in the last day or two, all ages, all different social backgrounds, people from London, people who've travelled from across the country, and people from abroad, tourists who were here perhaps on holiday, all wanting to be part of this very historic moment. Many of them clutching bouquets of flowers with messages and drawings attached. I was struck by a couple that I wanted to bring you. Scarlett, whose age 11 had written, "R.I.P. Queen Elizabeth, you'll be with us in our hearts." And Olivia, who's 12, had written, "You're the only queen I knew. Thank you for serving us." And you'll remember, of course, that the new king did come and meet and greet some of the people in the crowd who'd waited to see him yesterday. They were offering their sympathies, of course, for the death of the Queen and their gratitude for her long and many years of service, but also a warm welcome to him. We, of course, saw him being kissed and shaking many, many hands. And I dare say that a lot of the people who are still here at Buckingham Palace may be hoping that he will come out a little later to greet them as well. But in the meantime, he has a very busy afternoon of meetings ahead. He's got meetings with religious leaders. We're expecting the Archbishop of Canterbury and also the Dean of Westminster, because, of course, the funeral of the Queen will take place at Westminster Abbey. And while I'm sure a lot of the finer details will have already been sorted out, there will be other details to attend to. And so the religious leaders, there are also political meetings as well. We know that the new king had an audience with Liz Truss, the new Prime Minister, yesterday. She offered her sincere condolences, and we know that he said to her that the death of the Queen was the moment that he had been dreading. Well, today the new king will meet members of the cabinet and also leaders of the opposition. And our political editor, Chris Mason, is here to look ahead perhaps to those meetings. And I suppose what I'm really struck by, Chris, is that as Prince of Wales, he will have met a lot of these people before, but today he's meeting them as king, and that's very different, isn't it?
It is very different, and I think what we're seeing, and we're going to see over the next couple of days, is the exposure to sunlight, if you like, of our baffling and deeply historic constitution. And because this moment hasn't happened for so many decades, for so many of us, we're seeing it for the first time. And of course, for the participants, they are taking part in it for the first time. And I know from speaking to them, they feel the weight of that very significantly, irrespective of their political views, whether it be attendance at the Accession Council this morning, or indeed attendance happening in the next hour. Opposition leaders, Sir Ed Davey for the Liberal Democrats, Sir Keir Starmer for the Labour Party, Ian Blackford, the SNP's leader at Westminster, arriving and then taking part in an audience with the King together. And they all feel that kind of weight of history, as the crowds do this afternoon. I've just made my way up the Mall, and you get that real sense, don't you? Of course, attending here wouldn't necessarily be for everyone, but for those who are here, I detect a sense of pride and quiet reflection. Yes, a sombre mood, but also families finding time to laugh and joke amongst themselves, whilst aware of the import of what has happened and wanting to be a small part of it. And in their own way, that's exactly the tone I hear from political leaders who have a more involved role to play, but also playing their own role in this passage of history.
Yes. I'm very struck as well, Chris. There are so many people here, and yet it's very quiet, isn't it?
It's quiet, it's dignified, and it's polite. So central London, as with so many city centres at busy times on a Saturday afternoon, can be a place of bustle, can't it? And it can be a case of, I don't know, microaggressions sometimes if you're heading down Oxford Street doing the shopping. Today there isn't that. Even just making my way here through packed crowds where you are shoulder to shoulder with people people being polite, and that sense of solemnity around the events of the last few days being noticed in how people are behaving, and people taking their time, giving those in front of them time, in the hope that they get a chance to get as close to the palace as they can.
And in terms of these political meetings, we've heard a lot from politicians, haven't we, in the last day or so, about how they really valued their time with the Queen. And I was very struck by Theresa May saying that what was wonderful was that you knew no details of that conversation would emerge, nothing would get leaked. So I can't really expect you to tell me the sorts of things they're going to talk about, because we won't know. But I mean, will it be formal, informal? Do we have any sense of what those conversations might be like?
I suspect it'll be more informal than you might imagine the occasion would suggest. And you're so right about politicians' reflections on their meetings with the sovereign, for so long the Queen, now the King, that even the most inveterate gossips, who I would ring at the drop of a hat in order to find out what was going on, and so often they'd be willing to privately spill the beans and let me know what was going on. When it comes to conversations with the monarch, there is that sense that that is a line that just simply isn't crossed. They'll acknowledge a meeting has happened, not least because so often it is in the public record that it has happened, and of course if you're a Prime Minister, those audiences happen every week. But as for the content, there's that sanctity around it, and they hugely value that, because you have someone for so long in the Queen and now in the King, where they have a particular role in our Constitution, obviously a unique role at the apex of our Constitution, but can offer those reflections based on the meetings and the experiences that they have had. Now, clearly for the new King, that is very different from the longevity of the direct experience the Queen had with so many heads of state and government over decade after decade after decade. It'll be a different kind of experience and wisdom, if you like, that the King brings. A lesser one, let's be frank, but nonetheless within the sanctity of a room in the palace where they know it's not going to leak, where they can reflect openly and candidly in a way that they barely can with anyone else.
We must leave it there. Chris Mason, our political editor there. Thank you. And with that, I'll hand you back to the studio.
Thanks very much, Rebecca and Chris. Very interesting to listen into the conversation of what will happen in the coming hours. But for a moment, I just want to think about when the Queen came to the throne in 1952. Britain's role in the world was changing rapidly. Former colonies were gaining independence as the British Empire evolved into the Commonwealth. And the 7 decades of the Queen's reign saw even greater change. I am joined now by the High Commissioner for Canada in the UK, Ralph Goodale. Great to have you with us. First thing I noticed as you came to sit beside me is that you are in a morning suit. You have just come from the Accession Council. What was that like?
Well, it was history in the making. There was a lot of feeling in the room that this was very strange. This hasn't happened for 70 years, but something very important was happening. So that sense of history was there. Obviously, there was also grief and mourning with respect to the sad passing of Her Majesty. A lot of many fond recollections and that warmth and love that people show toward Her Majesty and Her late Majesty, and the way that was always reflected by her. There was also, not to be disrespectful at all, but some excitement about the change that was taking place, and a lot of people wondering now what kind of a new monarch do we have, and what can we expect, and what will be the first thing that King Charles does and says. There was also, because of the nature of the event, publicly acknowledging the death of the monarch and the new monarch having acceded to the throne already. There was that important point in a constitutional democracy about continuity, and that the process is unfolding as it should. This particular Accession Council procedure dates back several hundred years to when we didn't have modern communications and people were never sure, is the monarch still alive or not? Is there a new king or queen? And if so, who in the world is it? None of those are issues in this day and age, but it is important to have that continuity and that process, that ceremony to accomplish the transition.
And this was something that was televised for the very first time. I found it compelling to watch, to see that amount of people from public and private lives, from secular and religious, all in the same room. And I wonder,
who might never be in the same room together, but they were today.
Yes, and what was that like? I mean, was there a lot of chatter between people? Tell me a little bit more.
There was. It was quite a talkative room before the procedures started. And I think that underscores another point that goes along with continuity, and that is the sense of unity. In our kind of government, both in the UK and in Canada, with a constitutional democracy, there is a separation between the political head, the rough and tumble of politics represented in the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, and all the party participants, and then the sovereign. That's separate. That's head of state, not head of government. And that separation between the two is really important. You will have cacophony on the political side, but you'll have unity and cohesion with the head of state.
So what was your role today?
To represent Canada. Really, in two ways. I, having been a cabinet minister in Canada for many years, I am a member of Her Majesty's, His Majesty now, Privy Council for Canada. But my role today was not as a Privy Councillor. It was as High Commissioner for Canada in the United Kingdom. The Queen is the Queen of Canada. Now the King is the King of Canada. And the process of transition needs to be accomplished in all of the realms as well, where the King now is the head of state outside of the UK. That includes Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and so forth.
And let's talk about that relationship, which of course you are so much in the centre of at the moment. The Queen visited, I read, 22 times. I think it was the most visited country.
We're very proud of that record.
Yes, and talk to me a little bit about her presence there and the importance of it, and perhaps also how you're looking at the future relationship.
Well, 22 times, more than any other country in the world. She was always, of course, careful and discreet, but came very close to saying Canada is her favorite place to be outside of the United Kingdom. And she didn't just go to the big cities and drop in and leave. She would be typically on her royal visits there for several days in a row and visiting all parts of the country, east, west, north, south, urban, rural. She paid particular attention to Indigenous people. And that, of course, is a very important Canadian issue. The reconciliation, the healing after horrible experiences like residential schools and a range of other challenges and issues. Healing and reconciliation is exceedingly important. And of course, Indigenous people feel that their relationship is not so much with any particular government, but with the Crown. That's the name in which the treaties were written many years ago. And so the Crown has a very important role to play. And King Charles is very well steeped in these issues. He's not a newcomer to issues about the environment or about Indigenous rights or treaty rights. He has studied them, he's been involved with them, and he will bring a very important presence to that whole discussion, and I think make a significant contribution to the healing and the reconciliation that is necessary.
After such a difficult week, particularly with James Cree Nation, of course, as well.
In my home province of Saskatchewan. And Her Majesty's last official message was to send a message of condolences to the people of Saskatchewan.
Yes, I'm very sorry for what the community has gone through. Thank you so much for coming in. That is the High Commissioner for Canada in the UK, Ralph Goodale.
Thank you.
Let's return now to Buckingham Palace. Charlotte Gallagher is with the crowds that have been gathering outside. Hi, Charlotte. Tell us a little bit about the people you're meeting.
There are thousands and thousands of people here today. I came down yesterday afternoon and it was pretty easy to walk through Green Park, which is the park that backs onto the palace. Today it is absolutely rammed. They've even had to do a one-way system, close the tube station. There are that many people that want to come down here, pay their respects to Queen Elizabeth, and also pay their respects to the new king, King Charles III. And you can just see now lots of people against these barriers, hoping perhaps to see the new king. We're hoping he may come out a bit later on. Let's talk to a couple of them now. I'm going to remember these names because they're royal names. George.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good today, thanks.
And how old are you?
13.
13. And what did you think when you heard about Queen Elizabeth?
I was quite shocked. I knew it was going to happen in my lifetime, but it's always a shock when it happens.
And what are your memories of Queen Elizabeth?
I don't really have many memories because I was quite young, but I know that she was a great queen to England.
Did you sit and watch the Jubilee with your family when that was going on?
Yes, I did.
And did you enjoy it?
Yeah.
And what about your friends and school? What have they been saying?
They were quite shocked as well. I know quite a lot of England is shocked at the death of Queen Elizabeth.
And you've come down here today. Why did you decide to do that? You came with your mum, didn't you?
Yeah, I came down here because it is a historic moment and also just to remember the Queen.
Yeah. And have you seen anyone yet? Has anyone driven past so far?
I've seen Camilla drive by.
Oh, wow. And were people waving? What were people doing?
People were screaming, waving, just trying to get her attention, really.
Cool. And now we've got some other royal names, in fact, Nuala. This is Margaret from Swindon and her daughter Diana, who was named after the Diana, Princess Diana. Yeah. And Margaret, you've been telling me that you had an experience with the Queen, didn't you?
Yes, I was silver service waitressing and the Queen was sat about 5 seats down from where my people were that I was serving. And I learnt at that occasion that once she put her knife and fork down, that we were to start clearing and that everybody that hadn't finished eating, it was just hard luck, unfortunately.
So people had their food taken
away from them, yes.
And what was your impression of Queen Elizabeth? Obviously, you were fairly close to her in that room.
I've loved her all my life. I'm 74 now and I can remember when the coronation was and we were the only person with a television in the street and my dad got a piece of perspex and it was red, white and blue that he put in front of the television as all the neighbours crowded into the front room and sat with us to watch the coronation.
And I imagine you've had similar celebrations for the jubilees and the weddings and the babies that have come since then.
Yes, I loved the royal family. That's why my daughter was named after Diana, because she was the most popular person in the household at the time Diana was born. And yes, I've loved all the royal family. I've grown up with Princess Anne. I've got puzzles at home, loads of jigsaw puzzles of the Queen. I've even got one with Prince Charles on when he was a small child.
And Prince Charles is a really similar age to you, so you've obviously grown up with him in the newspapers, on television, seeing him grow up as you grow up.
I have, but I did take more notice, I must admit, of Princess Anne, because I think she was a girl. But I've got cuttings from newspapers going back years when various things have happened with the royal family, like, as you say, the babies and the weddings. And yes, I've enjoyed all of it. That's why my daughter wanted me to come with her today, because she knew I was such a royalist.
You got the train down from Swindon today, and is that why you wanted to come to pay your respects?
Yes, I did. I wanted to come and my daughter wanted to come, and so we came together.
It's kind of a once-in-a-lifetime moment, hopefully in my lifetime anyway. You never know, you know, you might hand it over to William at a certain point. You just, don't know, do you, how long they're going to reign for. But 70 years, for myself as a woman, whether you love the royals or you don't, you have to be just blown away by, what she's achieved in her lifetime. She's a real pioneer and, for women out there, so.
And you're like me, you'll have never known another monarch. We all grew up with the Queen, and even if you didn't necessarily think about her a lot, she was just always there, wasn't she? She was a constant in our lives.
I woke up really sad, and I don't know why. Like, obviously I've never met her. My parents have met royals, and I've met other royals, but never her. But I just woke up so incredibly sad that day, and listening to the radio and other people's stories. But I think she would want the whole of the of Britain to be really happy, and she'd be so proud of this right now. Look at all these people, different ages, come out to show their love and support for their country, and of course their new king. So it's fantastic.
Yeah, and I remember.
I'm just going to cross back to Balmoral right now. As you see the crowds, we're seeing the family that are at the moment. I know there's a little glitch on the line there, but they have been attending a service at Balmoral, as we've been following over the past hour or so. We're going to connect with my colleague, Kirsty Wark, who is at Balmoral, who has been watching events that are there.
Hello
Kirsty.
there. So the members of the royal family have completed their service of prayer at Pratik Kirk, which of course is the kirk the family all knows so well. And they have come out of their cars, and they are walking slowly, steadily past the crowds. I'm joined by a royal correspondent, Sarah Campbell. So, we didn't know whether or not they would take walkabout. It's obviously a very difficult day for them, because they have been in Balmoral really for the last 3 days. Certainly Princess Anne, also Prince Edward and Prince Andrew, and the other younger royals joined. We can't forget this is a very emotional moment for them as they walk along across the bridge where they've come so many times to come to stay at Balmoral.
You're absolutely right. This is a very familiar place for them. Let's just talk about who is here. So it's the Queen's.
And we can see now, led by Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, and Commander Tim Lawrence, Sarah Tyndall, Peter Phillips. We can see Peter Phillips there. We can see coming forward Prince Edward and his daughter Louise and his wife, the Countess of Essex, talking to members of the public, saying hello, acknowledge them. Prince Andrew walking alone, Princesses Eugenie and Beatrice. Solemn, asking somebody where they'd come from. They said they'd come from Suffolk. I think probably heartened by the fact that people are here to pay their respects, very quietly pay their respects. And the Countess of Wessex so close to the Queen.
Yes, indeed. It is quite a moment over the last 3 days, and it almost 2 days.
Yeah.
Seems almost incredible. It's been such a little amount of time since the Queen passed away, but over the past couple of days, the family have gathered here, while of course the new King had to take on his duties. The rest of the family have come here. They have spent time behind closed doors to be together as a family.
And there's something about the simplicity of Pratik Kirk, which is very fitting with the moment. I mean, obviously, all the statecraft and all the ceremony of London is incredibly important, but for a family in mourning, coming to the place that, as I said earlier, Princess Beatrice said is the most beautiful place in the world.
Just taking time now to look at the flowers.
Yeah. And these flowers, there can't be any flowers left in Aberdeenshire.
The smell over there.
And there's Prince Andrew out with the family. We haven't seen Prince Andrew since, I think it was Prince Philip's service of remembrance.
Yes, it's been a difficult couple of years, for the Queen, for the family, but now coming together, looking at those messages, and smelling the smell of those flowers. I can't tell you the aroma over there.
I know, flowers of all kinds. And I think it's interesting that, Princess Anne, very, very kind of engaging, very gracious, and very much her daughter in the same manner, welcoming the crowds. It's difficult for the crowds as well, funnily enough, I think.
Yeah. A lot of the people I've spoken to today who've arrived here said part of the reason was also to give their support to the family.
Yes.
To be here for the Queen, but also to be here for the family, because as we look at them now, it's the closest reminder, isn't it, that she was a mother.
Yes.
She was a grandmother.
Yeah.
She was a great-grandmother. And so whilst duty is all important for members of the royal family, they are grieving today.
Yeah. And there is, I think that is, I can't see quite who's putting his arm round Princess Eugenie.
That's Prince Andrew.
It is Prince Andrew putting his arm around her. And the other thing to remember, of course, is that the children, the grandchildren, in the latter years probably got to see much more of their grandmother when she stopped travelling so much.
Indeed, she stopped long-haul travel. She stopped short-haul travel in 2015, so she has been very UK-based. But yes, you're right. And even during lockdown,
yes,
meant less travelling abroad, less duties. So they would have spent time with her.
And there is the Countess of Wessex putting her arm briefly round Sarah Tyndall. Commander Lawrence, he's always such a stalwart, Commander Lawrence.
We should say that the Earl and Countess of Wessex's daughter, Lady Louise, is there.
Yes.
Their son, James, isn't. But that's because he's at school.
Yeah. And what will happen now, presumably, although we don't know, is that these members of the royal family will stay at Balmoral. There we are. There are so many flowers, and there are lines and lines and lines of people here waiting to give their flowers as well.
It's noticeable today. I think people are aware, certainly people I've spoken to, that the Queen will not be here for much longer. She has spent so many years here. She is such a member of the community here, was a member of the community here, and I think people will be sad that tomorrow she will be gone.
Yes.
She will never be here in this beautiful corner of Scotland, and you've been here today. The sun has been shining. It's not difficult to see why it was such a favourite place for the Queen, such a favourite place for the Queen's family.
Everybody there, well, all the children and grandchildren have grown up having the freedom of Balmoral and having that continuity, knowing that this is their private residence. It's not part of the Crown Estate. Just like Sandringham, it's a private residence. And they have grown up with the people of particularly Balter, in a nearby village. And look, they're all stooping down to look at some of these extraordinary messages. I remember yesterday looking, and there was the Robert Burns poem, My Heart is in the Highlands.
There's Paddington Bear.
There's Paddington Bear, there was a corgi. There was also, thanks to the Queen for doing her duty and service right to the end. And that may be reference, obviously, to Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, but just being our Queen till the very end. The younger members on the left there with Lady Louise. And there is Eugenie pointing out some of the messages with many, many of the flowers. And these messages will all be recorded. They'll all be, photographed. They'll be kept. And I think that's very important for many of the people that are here, the messages as much as the flowers.
I think it's important for the family as well. The new King said in his first message how much of a comfort it was to know how much the Queen was held in people's affection, and all of those messages make that absolutely clear.
And of course we know too that the Queen loved her gardens, and loved her gardens here, and was with her gardener only last week. And people have gone to such effort to bring heather from their own gardens, to bring flowers from their own gardens.
I think they're just about to head back into the privacy of Balmoral Castle, the place that, as we've said, was such a favourite of the Queen's. The emotion clear.
I think they're standing to give respect. Moving back slowly in behind the gates, which will close again to allow people to lay more flowers.
And that was a lovely moment.
So, ending their impromptu walkabout with a greeting for the crowds, ending that lovely moment of saying farewell to the crowds.
It seemed to be a thank you as well, didn't it? And the crowd acknowledging that. Very still, very sombre, very respectful, I think, but a nice moment acknowledging the respect that the crowd have here for the Queen to have travelled all this way just to be a part of this, and just a lovely, I think, mutual acknowledgement there.
And I think too the fact there was silence. I think people are very mindful of people's privacy. People are mindful of people's emotions, and I think that air, just welcoming her, just welcoming them to come, to walk up to their own house.
Yeah, really. One imagines that it must be a very difficult time for them. As a member of the royal family, you have to put a brave face on, don't you? That's part of their job. But they have lost somebody who has been an important part of their lives personally for so many years.
Yes, and as you say, the coffin will not be at Balmoral for much longer. We expect it to leave sometime tomorrow to Edinburgh to eventually lie in the state of St Giles. So this is, in a sense, the royal family saying goodbye to this part of their lives. Jane.
Hey, Kirsty, thank you very much. Speaking there, of course, from Balmoral, where that service has just taken place, I think also just very evident the grief that the family were experiencing. I want to turn now to Windsor Castle. The Queen chose to spend most of her time in her last year there. The flag, which had been at half-mast since her death, was raised again in recognition of the King's proclamation. Crowds have continued to gather outside the late Queen's residences across the country to lay flowers, as we've seen, and also pay their respects to Her Majesty. Our correspondent, Dan Johnson, reports now from Windsor.
Terry Stelling served in Her Majesty's name, and this morning he came to Windsor to pay thanks for her service.
Ma'am, it was an honour to serve you and the country. God bless you, your servant. I swore an allegiance to the Queen when I first joined up. While she was there, everybody had so much confidence. But now that she's gone, we don't know what Charles the King's going to be. We've got a new Prime Minister. Everything's changing all at once.
And that shift was symbolised here as the new King was officially proclaimed. Modern methods are being used to keep up with the most ancient ceremonies. Tim was keeping an eye on the Accession Council meeting.
It's a sad day and a good day for the King. So it's mixed emotions.
What do you think of all the the ceremony? It's a big moment in the life of the nation.
We've never known anyone other than the Queen, and nor are most people in this country. So it's a momentous time, yeah.
All sorts of people have come for all kinds of reasons, from many different places, to leave their own tribute. But as ever, it is the Queen herself who's the consistent presence, the unifying force here.
The flowers are being moved each night into the castle itself, so what's here now is just what's built up this morning. And if we turn around to look down Windsor's long walk, you can see just how many people there are arriving.
The scene is similar at Buckingham Palace. So what does the Queen mean to Shirley?
Everything. I've known all my life. And her father before him. And it's a privilege to be here. To just be part of what everybody feels. We've lost someone very, very gracious.
Some are here in Windsor in sadness, others in gratitude. And there's a broader sense of what a big change this is in the life of the nation.
This is all just who we are as the British, isn't it? All coming together, and yeah, you just feel very united.
You feel that she's still here. That's all I can say.
This is about duty, respect, and giving thanks for the Queen we've lost and for the new King. Dan Johnson, BBC News, Windsor.
Let me turn now to some of the key events that are expected over the next 10 days. The Queen's coffin is expected to leave Balmoral tomorrow, as we were hearing, to be taken to the Palace of Holyrood House in Edinburgh. It will be taken in a procession along the Royal Mile to St Giles Cathedral for a service attended by members of the royal family. The Queen will remain at St Giles for a period of lying at rest. The coffin will then be flown to London and taken to Buckingham Palace and then to the Palace of Westminster. And it is there, in the ancient space of Westminster Hall, that the Queen will lie in state, members of the public having the opportunity to pay their respects. The conclusion of these events will be the state funeral in about 10 days' time at Westminster Abbey, after which the Queen will be laid to rest at St George's Chapel, Windsor. Our diplomatic correspondent, James Landale, explained that the enormity of the change in the monarch is now sinking in for many people as a result of today's events.
What struck me today was just how much it was a mix of ancient and modern. In times past, all the old literature, the language we saw, the old rituals, the phrases, dating back so many centuries. But at the same time, the sheer modernity of it, the fact that the cameras were allowed in to see the Crown engaging with its Privy Council, see the King talking to his parliamentarians as never seen before. At the same time, the Privy Council, many of them came out and mingled here, waiting for the proclamation. And I have to say, just like everybody else, they were getting their cameras out, even though some of them were wearing morning dress and top hats. And I have to say, when I spoke to them, quite a few of them were blinking pretty hard. There was a real sense this morning that for some of them, this was the moment when the penny dropped. And I think that's what we're going to see later on this week as the coffin travels, as the Queen lies in state. That sense of just people getting the chance to be exposed to what's happened, not just read about it and watch it on the news, but to actually engage with this extraordinary event that has taken place, with two things happening. People paying their respects to the Queen, paying their tribute, their memories, assessing this extraordinary life, but at the same time, learning a little bit more about their new king and how he wishes to reign. His address yesterday, his declaration today, clues and hints about how he is going to do things, not just to reinforce his mother's legacy, but also do things his own way in the future.
Thanks so much to James. I want to cross back over to Buckingham Palace to Rebecca Jones, where I think perhaps some people are arriving. Rebecca?
Yes, you join us just as we're seeing two cars emerge from the gates of Buckingham Palace, and I'm pretty sure I'm being told it's quite hard because I am quite short and can't see over the crowds here, but that the Queen Consort Camilla was in one of the cars. The new King, King Charles III, was not, because the Royal Standard would have been flying atop of the Sovereign's vehicle. And we also know that the new King, King Charles III, is having a series of meetings inside Buckingham Palace this afternoon with religious and political leaders. No doubt, though, the crowds that have gathered here hoping that he will emerge at some point to perhaps meet them in the way that he did yesterday. I'm delighted to say that we're joined by the biographer of Prince Philip, Eade now. And Philip, I was just talking about the crowds, and when you mix and mingle with them and talk to them, clearly the Queen meant so much to them in so many different ways. I just wondered what your thoughts and reflections are.
Well, it's a very sad day, but obviously, in a way, it's also a celebration of a truly remarkable life. I mean, she 70 years on the throne. I mean, I don't think we'll ever see anyone quite so sort of well suited to the part. I think her first Prime Minister, Churchill, said, you know, if all the film people in the world scoured the globe, they'd never find anyone who was so well suited to being Queen as Princess Elizabeth was. And she fulfilled all his hopes for what he envisaged in this new Elizabethan age. And really, here we are 70 years later, and you know, really, she never put a foot wrong.
No. How important will she have been, and indeed Prince Philip be, in the kind of king that Charles will be?
Well, I think that obviously, you know, they'll have had an enormous influence on him. I mean, to begin with, I mean, you could say that Prince Charles had, in many ways, a very difficult, hard early childhood. They were, after all, the Queen became Queen when Prince Charles was only 4 or 5. And there's a very sort of poignant news footage when they went the following year or the year after that to Canada. They were away for 4 months. Prince Charles was obviously left at home. And when they arrived back on the station, they spent a good sort of 5 minutes, 6 minutes talking to all the dignitaries before eventually Prince Philip turned around and ruffled Prince Charles's hair. And I think, I think some of that, it wasn't their fault, but it was just how things worked in those days. And, I mean, the upper classes in particular saw less of their children anyway. But I mean, in their case, being the Queen and her consort, they had very little time really. And I think that the upbringing of Prince Charles and Prince Anne was very different from what came later with the 2 younger princes, who had a very, by that time they'd learnt the sort of 60s brought a sort of change in attitudes to parenting and that sort of thing. But anyway, but Prince Charles, was also a very different character to his father. He was sent to Gordonston and sort of famously hated it. For Prince Philip, that had been the perfect school. It probably wasn't the perfect school for Prince Charles. But I think years later, I think the product we've got is he's a very sensitive man, but I think he'll be an extremely good king. I mean, I think he'll be a very different monarch to his mother, of course, but I don't see, I've every confidence that he'll be amazingly good.
That's a good note as well on which to end. Philip Eade, royal biographer, many thanks for joining us. And with that, I'll hand you back to the studio.
Thanks very much, Rebecca. Well, I have another guest joining me here in studio. It is Pratik Dattani, who met the Queen in 2018 at Buckingham Palace. He's the director of the longest-running award ceremony for South Asians, the Asian Achievers Award, which will hold a special tribute to Her Majesty, the Queen, this year. Thank you so much for coming in studio. I'd really like to know what your memories are of the Queen when you met her.
So I met her as part of a business delegation that had come over from India. The Indian finance minister, as well as some of the top industrialists in India. And it was to commemorate the start of a UK-India Year of Culture. So half the people in the room were from a cultural background, half from very much business, finance background. And I was really surprised with the ease with which she went from person to person and flipped between talking about India's economic growth 1 minute, and then the very next minute talking about the cultural epicenter that is the UK as well as India, talking about Indian dance forms, talking about some of the music that she's enjoyed. And I think just flipping between those two, it was extraordinary to think this is somebody who's been to 100 different countries, has met so many different people, and yet she has so much detail about some of these things.
And left an impression. Do you remember what she said to you directly?
I think it was something along the lines of, so I was talking about 2 Indian dance forms called Bharatanatyam and Kathak. And she said, oh, I know those. And for most Indians, actually, it's difficult to tell the difference between the two. So the fact that she knew, that put her in a class of her own.
So was a remarkable knowledge and interest, which we keep hearing again and again, Pratik, don't we? But when it comes to India, or indeed some South Asian countries, she had a keen interest. Tell me a little bit about her involvement.
So she's actually visited India 3 times. Last time was during the Golden Jubilee celebrations, and before that in the 80s as well. And in her last visit, what really stood out, I think, for not just the Indian public, but the wider South Asian public, is the humility and the awareness of history that she brought to the visit. So she did say in her banquet speech there that she is aware of some of the difficult history between the 2 countries, and the tone that she struck there was absolutely perfect, both from a policymaker perspective in India as well as the wider public. She got it absolutely right. And I think that shows in the way that India, for example, has responded to the sad passing of the Queen. So flags in Delhi are at half-mast, and India has officially declared a day of mourning. And that's even more surprising, given that India has 1.4 billion people, and 99% of those people are less than 70 years old. So they have not known anyone else apart from the Queen.
Tell me a little bit as well. I mentioned there briefly the Asian Achievers. What was her involvement with that, and what was really, I suppose, the purpose of her role within that organisation?
So this year is the 20th year of the Asian Achievers Awards, and this celebrates South Asian excellence across the UK, across all the countries of the UK. And this year, our ceremony is taking place in just under 2 weeks' time. And we're dedicating the awards to the Queen. In particular, the Woman of the Year award that we have, we're going to dedicate it to the Queen. Talking about a year seems too little. I mean, she's very much the woman of the century, given that she's provided stability across the Commonwealth. But it's our small way of being able to honour her. And since the news came, several of our sponsors and key dignitaries and key attendees have got in touch with us to say, what are we doing to commemorate? So just this weekend, in fact, today, we are just getting a plan together to be able to do something special, and part of that is to be able to dedicate the ceremony to her.
And to commemorate. How lovely. Thank you so much, Pratik Dattani, for coming in to join us.
Thank you.
Now, I want to take a moment to return to what we have seen out of Balmoral over the past half hour or so. As you can see, members of the royal family there, they walked by the people who came out to pay their respects to the Queen. This was after a service that had taken place at Crathy Kirk. I think also, particularly as we see members of the royal family here, their grief probably palpable in a way that we have not seen in the previous days. Now, there was a lot of flowers, as you can imagine, that were left in the area just outside Balmoral, and they have taken their time to read the messages that were left and the tributes, the cards, of course, so many that we are seeing right there. And there was, I think, also some, very heartfelt expressions of grief, and like any family, of course, sharing with one another what it is that they are reading, what they are seeing, a little interaction with the people that had come out, but it was a solemn and somber walk past the people as they then decided to spend a little bit of time. They also did, which was a lovely moment, really. The family waved goodbye to well-wishers as they stood at the gates of Balmoral before walking back inside the castle grounds, and the people there cheering them as well. Now, I would like to turn now to my next guest who has come in. That is Anisa Kadri, who has been taking a look at some of the reaction that has been coming in to people at the BBC. So good to have you with us, Anisa. Thanks so much for joining us. Tell me a little bit about what you're hearing and seeing. I was just telling our viewers there a little bit about what was happening at Balmoral and that outpouring, I suppose, of love and respect for the Queen that her family were witnessing.
Yes, of course. And here in the BBC building, I've been monitoring the BBC website where we've got a live tributes page. So people are sending in their memories of Queen Elizabeth II. Just to give you a flavour, there's praise for her natural grace. One person describes her as a bit of a legend. Now, research suggests that almost a third of us have either seen Queen Elizabeth II in real life or indeed met her as well. So some people getting in touch with us at the BBC website, they've been sending in their photos of meeting the Queen for our tributes page. So they range from Becky from High Wycombe showing the Queen her puppet making skills at school back in the 1990s. And of course, as you can see, pictures of the Queen accepting flower bouquets over the decades. So a wide variety of tributes there.
Yeah, I think this is the thing that has really struck me, Anisa, with the people that I have spoken to, the people I've been watching and listening to over the past few days. So many personal memories that people have of meeting the Queen. I even remember when she was here, for mine, it was in New Broadcasting House when she came to open the building. And it was, so even every person that we meet seems to have some sort of interaction with this woman who led the most remarkable life.
Well, yes, you remember meeting the Queen at work then, and there's a real variety of royal engagements, as you expect, featured on our live tributes page. Some people are remembering being honoured for their work. For example, Dr. Abdallah Yassin attended a reception where Her Majesty honoured religious organisations. So there he is, remembering that special day for him, and he described her as welcoming. And there you can see a man called Mark from Tunbridge Wells who met her in 2002. It was at the Ardingly South of England show, and he says he was covered in what he describes as cow splatter. Yeah, I know.
She would totally understand, though, I think.
Apparently she wasn't put off at all. He shook her hand and says it was the proudest day of his life. So that's how much the Queen meant to people. Memories ranging from Jubilee parties to just people expressing how, you know, things have really changed. So what we're also being told is that she really knew how to throw a party, and you can find out more on the BBC News website, and it's via there you can send in your own tributes for Her Majesty.
And so we very much hope that people will add their memories as we talk about the Queen and her remarkable life. Thanks so much, Anisa, coming in to join us. I just want to take a moment now again to return to Balmoral and to take a look at the family members that came out to pay their respects, along with, of course, so many well-wishers that came to join them, as you can see there, making their way when they came from the service at Crathy Kirk, and then walked from the service to greet some of the well-wishers that were there, but just a few words that were spoken for those that were in front. It wasn't stopping to greet for a long time, but really made their way to the floral tributes that had been laid outside Balmoral Castle. As we can see there, bending down to take a look at some of the cards, and there have been so many people that have been really giving their thanks, offering their respects, also adding to that the grief that people are going through along with the members of the royal family. Princess Beatrice and Eugenie were there also with their father, Prince Andrew. We did see at one point them having their arms around one another, as obviously that they had grief that they are going through. But as with any funeral, of course, memories and warm and also amusing memories, of course, that they will have, along with that palpable grief that they are all experiencing as well. And there we can see, of course, Prince Edward and Princess Anne also, that were all joined together as they went to see some of the wishes that came from the public that came out to Balmoral. Also, I should mention that the family did wave goodbye just outside Balmoral Castle before leaving the well-wishers.